Welcome back to Life's Deceit with me, your girl, Jen Simpson. I hope you guys are having a beautiful morning, afternoon, night, wherever you are in the world, wherever you're listening from. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the Life's Deceit platform where we break generational cycles, dismantle the lies, and we heal. And we do it authentically. I'm your host, Jen Simpson, and we turn silent battles into loud success. Today, we have a very special guest, and I'm excited about this guest. She is the truth teller. She's a generational breaker. And this guest is here to flip the script on everything you thought you knew about trauma, healing, and mental health. She's here to re-educate us on what trauma looks like, what it feels like, how it shows up in our body, how it shows up in our daily life. She's here to teach us about healing and the different forms of healing and remind us that healing is personal. Healing is personal and it's perfect for us, and we are deserving of it, and we need to give ourselves permission to heal and understand what mental health looks like, what it looks like for us, and how it may show up in our daily lives. Today's special guest is Martina Bailey. Martina is a licensed clinical social worker, trauma specialist, and a no BS truth teller. No BS truth teller. She's not about the nonsense, she's not about the lies, and she's not about the secrets. She can probably outlift the both of us in the gym and out-teach us when it comes to trauma and mental health. Martina Bailey is here to sit with us today and re-educate us and show us how to unlearn those things that were passed down to us that were lies, and out of fear that our loved ones, our family members, a close person in our life, could be a mother, a father, a sister, a colleague, it could be a teacher that taught us. She's going to dismantle it and she's going to re-educate us and teach us how to really learn how to navigate through mental health and healing and what trauma looks like. She has worked with many people. She has worked with Vietnam War veterans to toddlers. And today she's going to sit with us and unwind, and she's going to set the atmosphere and re-educate us on record on what mental health really is, what is trauma, and how to heal. So without further ado, please welcome Martina Bailey. Hello, Martina.
Hi.
How are you
Hi, Jen.
doing?
I am doing wonderfully. How are you, Jen?
I am feeling amazing, and I am absolutely honored to have the opportunity to sit down with you, a therapist. And I'm so proud of you for walking in your purpose and accepting your calling, because being a therapist is not an easy road.
No, it is not.
And I could say that because I'm not a therapist, but I find that when I have fireside chats, I take on people's, burdens and their
Yeah.
experiences, and I think about it and I'm analyzing it like, oh my gosh, I need to help that person. But I can imagine the weight of your job, but you take it on and you're doing it gracefully. And I thank you for stepping in the gaps because you are needed. And I'm sure you are doing an exceptional job.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I love being a therapist, but I also, I feel like being on this podcast, I think is such an honor, right? Because not only do I get to speak about my experience as a therapist, but as a human, right? Because therapists are human, right? And so
Right.
it's an honor.
Thank you for gracing the Licensees podcast and
Thank
for offering up your heart and yourself and your expertise and your experience and your human like nature to our listeners today. And I pray that this will be a blessing to somebody's life today. And, I always ask this question. I know that you are a therapist and obviously you are serving people and that is your birthright. But who do you consider yourself to be? What do you represent? And what do you hope that your legacy will be?
Those are those are wonderful questions, very deep. I consider myself to be the daughter of, of a woman who I feel like never really got the chance to live and thrive because she died at such an early age. My mom died of breast cancer when she was in her early 40s.
Wow.
And so, and she came to the United States when I was 6. And so I feel like, in a way, when you see a picture of us, we look so much alike. And so I feel like, in a way, I consider myself to be her daughter because of her strength and her resilience. And I just feel like I need to honor her name. Right? Um, and I think for me, what shaped it is that I just had in my life, I've just had dealing with just trauma after trauma.
Mhm.
I feel like my my path is to impart kind of the kindness that people have never showed me to others, right?
Yeah.
Because I just feel like, I feel like when people that sometimes the nicest people, the most compassionate people are not the people who've honestly been treated the nicest or the right. It's
Yeah,
really the
very
people
true.
who've had like the crappiest lives or like and that I've had in a way very good a very good life and I'm very grateful for my blessings. But I think my compassion honestly comes from the fact that like I've had some really crappy things happen to me and some really, hurtful things. And I never want people to feel the way that I did. And I just feel like those what's really that's where the most compassionate people come from, right? Having the
Hmm.
most difficult things happen to them and just being wanted to help people and help people. And I feel
Hmm.
like my experiences just shape me to who I am, right? And I strive to get better and I'm not perfect, but I think my journey is to also kind of also freeing myself from kind of like the burdens of childhood trauma and like not and also realizing that I can be a therapist and I can also take care of myself. Because I feel like with trauma, like a lot you just want to like take care of everyone. And a lot of reasons that's why I became a therapist, right? To really
Yeah.
take care and heal people. But I think, you know, I went through a very difficult time last year and I just realized that, you know, I need to in a way kind of free myself from my past. And that's been, and we can talk about that later, but that's also been really like really eye opening and and freeing in a way, like kind of becoming your authentic self.
You said something that to be honest, I haven't heard a therapist said. Maybe they said it in private, but it's being a therapist, you want to take care of everybody, but being able to take care of yourself. And I think that's the most challenging thing is that when we're serving other people, we forget about our own feelings. We forget about how much we take on and checking in with ourselves to make sure, are you okay? You just heard a traumatic story that's similar to what you've went through in your life. Are you okay? Did it open up old wounds? So I find that important that you said that, that it's important for you to take care of yourself because you're human. You can't forget that you're human. And I think a lot of people, when they have a career in a certain field, they forget that they're human. You are not binded by your career. It doesn't mean that you have to keep this strong face on and you're emotionless. So, like,
No,
we talk about therapists, and when I was talking to my first therapist that I decided, you know what, you're not right for me. It was like she was trying so hard to resist, like, show a strong face. Okay, well, this is what you can do. No, I want you to understand what I'm saying and feel that emotion.
yeah.
So I find that very interesting that you said that. And it's very, very important. Not just for regular people, but anybody who's in a career, whether you're a nurse or you're taking care of somebody, a caregiver, it is important to take care of yourself.
Oh. I love what you said about kind of tying your identity because that is true, and that did happen to me. I was at the VA and I loved it, and I did leave because I experienced racial discrimination that like
Mhm.
tore at my heart. Where in a
Yes.
point where I was like, I took a year break because I'm like, I need to reevaluate, what kind of therapist I want to be, and I need to heal. in order to
Mm.
become better for like continue to be better for my clients, right? I need to like continue, and that period of time where I'm like, if I'm not a therapist, what am I, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It was so tiny where I'm just like, in this day and age, especially like, I feel like in the American culture, actually, our job that is tied to our identity. That's the first thing some people ask you. What do you do for work?
right,
Right?
right. And they type to your identity.
Yeah. And so for a year and a half, I felt like I had this no identity. I mean, I was like Martina, the therapist, where my in-laws would ask me like a question, right? And I had to like kind of set this boundary because I would feel myself becoming angry. Where, not that like just, but kind of like, what am I? Like, if I'm not a therapist, then like, what am I? And
Who are you? What's your purpose?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I like, in a way, in a sense, well, I think leaving was hard, but it's also the best thing for me because it helped me reevaluate. Like, I'm not just Martina, the therapist, right? And I would tell my clients this if I have them, like, you are not your job. But here I had to take this lesson for myself where I'm not my job, and I had to like kind of rediscover what I was doing, what I wanted. And that
Hmm.
was scary.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's funny, you talk about racism a little bit. And I've always said it growing up, I never seen Black therapists. If they existed, I never heard of them. Never seen them, never heard of them, right? And I find that, yes, it's okay. You have to pick your therapist that works best for you, according to your needs, that makes you feel comfortable. And color is not attached to that at all.
Yeah.
100% not at all.
Mm-mm.
But I feel like more so a lot of people do want to see therapists that are of their color because maybe they might understand the experience different than somebody
Yes.
who's never experienced that in their culture or religion or whatever the case may be, right?
Hmm.
So for you, you talk a little bit about racism. What did that do to you in that moment, knowing that, okay, I see myself a therapist. I attached who I am to my career and I didn't separate them. How did that make you feel in that moment?
And I think that moment's really like a year moment, right? My
Yeah.
husband was so supportive, but like I was angry. There was a lot of anger and stress and just kind of disappointment where I gave my most of my career, to the VA, and like I was like very racially discriminated against, to the point that it was illegal,
Hmm.
right? And I kind of like, and being vulgar, it started to make me hate myself. Where they're like, well, you took this part of identity from me as therapist, and I
Hmm.
don't think at that moment I realized that I just really never came to see myself as a Black woman in America. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, like I always like, of course, like I've always knew, like I'm Black and like I'm African and I'm from Ghana and like being proud of that heritage. But in a way, it never really clicked until like I experienced that like traumatic racism. We're like, oh my gosh, I'm living as a Black woman in America and this is crappy.
Yeah.
And it made me realize because I started having nightmares and like a lot of anger and just seeing this, I became very angry at the world and it just shifted. And I realized, I isolated myself other than my husband from my family, from my in-law, because, it's just hard to deal with, especially when people don't get it. Does that make sense? And my
So,
husband's Caucasian, okay? And so his
yes.
family is white. And so, like, they didn't get it. And I think my husband had to have a meeting with them for that to kind of like, but it didn't click, right? Unless you're like a person of color experiencing racism, you're not gonna get it. You can be empathetic, but I don't think they get it how like traumatic and how it changed me. And
Hmm.
like I think I'm better, but I just realized like I think it changed me, and I also think it changed me for the better, where I'm more aware. Like unfortunately, this is a reality.
Yeah. You know, I like how you're so honest and you're honest with yourself. Because you're right, until it dawns on you, you don't really realize that you are defined by your race by other people. You didn't see it. You seen yourself as Martina, a
Yeah.
therapist, and you're a damn good one, right? But
Yeah,
until
I
somebody
think
says
so.
something, it really does change your world to the point where you're like, and you know what? I love how you said it, and you said it raw, because at some point we do start hating ourselves and we
Yeah.
start asking questions. Okay, is being black a curse?
Mhm. Yes.
This is, whose fault is this, and then you start to question God, and then you're like,
Yes.
okay, why did you make me black? Why, like,
Hmm.
if being black is beautiful, then
Yeah.
why do I feel this way? Why do I
And
feel like a plague? Why do I have to feel so much hurt from people, especially people that you're trying to help? So all the things that you just said were valid. And until you really have experienced it, you can't understand it. And it's not that we're trying to cause a rift. And I know that people can be really empathetic and apologetic about the experiences that we go through, but you can't understand that empty feeling at the bottom of our stomach that we can't really explain.
mhm.
And that dry swallow, like there's saliva in my mouth, but when I swallow, I feel so dry.
Yeah.
And then to add more to it, you're married to a Caucasian. And
Yes.
everything changes because now when you're walking in a store, on the road, driving, and you're together, people are looking at you guys. And now you're wondering what they're thinking.
Yeah. And I think with that, I also like realize also my privilege that I do have, right? Because
Right?
I'm not like everyone has privilege, like some kind of privilege, right? And I do
Some kind
realize
of
the
privilege.
privilege, yeah, the privilege I do have married, being married to a Caucasian man, right?
Hmm.
And but you're right, like I think I feel like sometimes, I'm gonna be honest and raw here, but sometimes I feel like because I'm so vocal, right? And as a black woman, I think people see black women if they're loud, they're angry, right? Even if we're not
Right.
angry at all, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so sometimes I feel like his family sees me as this angry black woman because I have this strong opinion, right?
Yeah. But you're allowed to have your opinion. And I think
Yeah. And
it
I
comes
don't
from
take crap.
misunderstanding. Yeah. And you know what? We don't have to. And I think we've been so conditioned to accept the BS,
Yeah.
and the moment that we speak out about it, it seems angry because we're so used to being quiet.
Yeah.
We were conditioned to be quiet. We're conditioned to tolerate things. We were conditioned to be silent, be seen but not heard.
Yes.
And the moment that we do that, people are like, okay, wait, why are you behaving like that? This is not like you. This is abnormal. You
Hmm.
sure something's not going on emotionally, mentally? So I understand what you're saying. And I think it's trained behavior and trained understanding that we have to teach them to unlearn and relearn us as a person. We have strong voices. We're just not able to use it before. And now we understand what self-love is and appreciating who we are and in our own skin color and in our own being. And it's challenging to teach them that because we want them to understand. But we also have to understand that as a culture for them too, these things were passed on to them from their generations as well.
Yeah.
The mindset, the beliefs, the way that they react to certain things that we do, they were taught to react in that way. So we have to be mindful of that too and reteach, unlearn and reteach. That is literally what we have. It's like a child. We have to teach them that that is wrong. Why is it wrong? Because this is why it's wrong. Why shouldn't that child touch a hot stove? Because every kid always says they want to. My
Yeah.
daughter, why do you want, don't touch a hot stove? Why not? I want to know what, because it's going to burn you. Why is it going to burn me? But it's just red. It looks like, don't touch it. So we have to teach again. And that's what we have to do as a culture. We have to learn together, and it hurts. It hurts to the core. And it takes a long time to heal from that. But you need to give yourself grace and you need to be patient with it. I know you're the therapist, but I could see your heart. Be patient with yourself and
Yes.
stop trying to force yourself to get over it. It happened to you, and you're allowed to feel how you feel and process those emotions and then use it to help other people that may be in the same situation as you, because that's what we do. We help each other to drive out hate. because truly you could have reacted in a different way, right? And just lashed out on everybody and probably break up with your husband. It's happened. It's happened to people where they're just like, you know what, forget it. I'm angry now. I'm angry at the whole entire race together, right? So thank you for sharing that because I truly I understand it. It's a tough thing to get over.
Yes, and I think I don't know if you ever go get over it, right? I think you move forward, right? Because
Yeah,
makes me now more hypersensitive. I'm like, oh no, is this going to be another incident? Does
yeah.
that make
And you
sense? It
kind
makes
of
me,
you're walking on eggshells, right?
yeah. And my
And you
whole,
know what? Y- I remember so when COVID hit, everybody was supposed to get the vaccine.
yeah,
And I was like, you know what? I'm not doing because I don't know what's in it. And I'm not going to put something in my body that I don't. I understand that there's a whole, you're either on this side or that side. I was on this side,
yeah,
which is a neutral side. It's between me and God. And I'm going to move according to the relationship that him and I have and what he told me to do, regardless. So I remember my boss had said something like, oh, well, and in that moment, I'm like, what she said? Like, I was literally like, what you said? She would always be like, she's not racist, all her friends are black and whatever. But in that moment, she didn't understand that what you just said was not okay.
yeah.
And I left it there. And months passed by, and there was an incident, and we are talking. I'm like, you said something to me a few months back that really hurt. And she sat there and she said, what did I say? And I told her exactly what she said. And she says, oh my God, I'm sorry. And she said, I didn't mean it that way. I said, well, I receive your apology because sometimes you don't understand. And I found myself in different situations at work where people are asking about my hair. And I'm like, yes, why do you keep asking me that? Next time I had braids in and she's like, oh, what's that? Are those the extensions? Okay. So another guy says, it's extensions. You don't know what extensions are? And he's not the same race as me,
Mhm.
but he just stepped in
Yeah.
and knew at that moment that you're making me feel uncomfortable. You need to stop. And the next time she said something, my boss said to her, re-educate her. So I said to her, I'm not too sure if you have black friends or you understand black culture, but I can see that you don't. And I don't mind taking the time to re-educate you on my culture and my hair. But some of the things that you say are inappropriate. And then she said, I love you just the way you are. And I said, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. I am finished right here. Right? So the next time you make a comment, then I have to reevaluate what I'm going to say to you. Because we find ourselves in these situations, and sometimes we really just have to re educate them because they just don't know.
Right.
And we say common sense is common, but it's not always common.
I mean, and
So,
sometimes you have to like put your boundary up and like know like who you're going to like disclose to and who you're not, right?
right, right. But they're just raised differently, and
Hmm.
it's not always a hate. It's just the way that they say things is just more
Ignorant.
just okay. I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah.
Like they don't think about it. They don't think
Hmm.
before they say it all the time,
Oh,
right?
yes. I have
So
family
it's
members like that.
yeah,
Literally
they just say it
nothing.
like
They don't
you
think
you
at
didn't
all.
think first before you said that. You didn't like I will break down things in my head first before I even open my mouth. How's what I'm gonna say affect that person in that way? I gotta be mindful of it, right?
Oh my goodness, I swear you're a therapist because I feel like every therapist goes through that. Even
I
on the
swear.
spectrum.
Even with my friends, I'm like, okay, well, if I tell her this, okay, give me a week. Let me break it down because I know how she'll react. Let me break it down in a way where she'll be like, okay, I understand. So it is hard. But Martina, you talk about your mom migrating to the US. Where are you from? I know you said that you were from Ghana. Were you born in Ghana?
Yes, I was born in Ghana and I came to the United States with my mom and my stepdad when I was 6. And then so all my siblings came. And then when I was 9, my parents died. And so I was
Both of
raised,
them passed.
both of them passed. And so I was raised by my 21-year-old sister. She's amazing. And so she
Wow.
raised all of us.
And where in Ghana are you from?
Cape Coast.
Oh, I've heard of there. I've definitely heard of there. So your sister was already in the US, or all of you came over?
All of us came over with like within like 3 months of each other. So there's six girls and one boy.
Wow, he's the lucky one.
He's the oldest. Yeah, I mean, he already like he was serving a mission for our church there. So and after that, he decided to stay there. But yeah, we all came over. We lived, we went to Arkansas. So I'm in
Okay.
Utah right now. So I grew up most of my life in Arkansas. And so, when I was 9, they passed away, and my sister, 21 at that time, there was 21, 20, and like 18. They all kind of like raised the three younger one, which would be me.
Yeah.
My sister who's 3 years older than me, and the other one who's 3 years younger than me.
Okay. And what was moving to the United States like for you at that time?
I do have like very like I do remember like when I was like 6 going to school, and trying pizza for the first time and thinking it's weird. So I do when as a kid when you have like very distinct memories, it still sticks with you, right?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or like trying to understand what they were saying because we did speak a little bit of English, but like it was just different, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I do remember that, and like little things. I remember my first crush that happened on a guy there.
You never forget your first crush,
I do,
okay?
and I remember his name.
Oh, wow.
So I remember like all this, like my first crush, and like, and it was so funny because a year ago I had a best friend when I was like 6, and I like when we moved after my parents died, she looked me up, and I got a Facebook message from her. And I'm like, this is
Recently?
crazy. Like a year ago, yeah. She looked me up. I got a
Wow.
Facebook message from her, and I was like, she's like, do you remember me? And I'm like, yeah. So it was so cool. It was so cool.
Have you guys met up yet, or?
We haven't. She's in Arkansas, so I told her if she's ever in Utah, um, and I haven't gone back to Arkansas because everyone just moved from there. She's ever in Utah. If I'm ever in Arkansas, we'll meet up. But no, but that was really cool.
Okay, that's nice. And did you always want to be a therapist, or did it kind of dawned on you when your parents passed away?
So I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a medical doctor. And at first, I wanted because my mom died of breast cancer, and so I've
Mm.
always been interested in science. By the time I was in 10th grade, I took all my science courses for my school, so I love science. And so that was the path I was thought I was going to take. And then I got to Chem 105 and in college,
Yeah,
and I fell asleep, and I'm like, I hate this, right?
yeah,
Like it was
yeah,
so.
yeah.
And so, I decided to take like a family recreation class. I went to BYU, and like something clicked. I was like, and I don't know why, because I knew that like my friends in Arkansas have like parents, like a mom and dad, right? And
Mhm.
I was raised by my sisters, but like it clicked that how I was raised was different. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And so
yep.
so that kind of piqued my interest in like what is normal and what is not normal, right?
Hmm.
Just seeing my mom and the being raised by my sister. So like that's how it kind of started, right?
Hmm.
And then like it clicked to me that I wasn't always supposed to be sad. But I just thought that was normal. Like I was always supposed to be sad. And so in college, I discovered I had depression. Well, like not college, but like when I was 16, like I got hit with a wave of depression. But I think before that, I was always had this level of like sadness. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And
Yeah.
so I think my journey like towards like mental health started like when I was like around 16, and it's been going towards, and I think God was leading me there, right? And I think I was supposed to be like a therapist, right? That was the right path for me. But it took me, experiencing depression to be able to kind of empathize, kind of like gear my interest of like, hey, there's
Hmm.
something going on there. And, and me like discovering, okay, this depression actually stems from unresolved trauma, right? And having a competent therapist help me guide me
Right.
there to help me with that. And once I
Hmm.
discovered like doing trauma work, I was like, okay, being a trauma therapist is the path I'm supposed to take, right? And so that's where it landed me there.
Would you say that that was the defining moment where mental and physical your physical world collided?
Oh my, so I love that because I just feel like a lot of people and a lot of doctors or therapists think like our mental, emotional, spiritual health and are separate, and they're not, right?
They're not. No.
And I just like our mental, physical, everything is so integrated with our soul. And if we don't address
Mhm.
that, and I address that in my therapy session, and like if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not like exercising, you're not gonna realize you're feeling better. And you may not feel the best that you can be if you do all three, also attend therapy, right?
Right.
And so, so I'm a big advocate of that. But when I started like working on my mental health and like I realized, every time like my body's so every time like, my mental health gets better, I drop in weight.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's because my body's just so stress sensitive. And so what a lot of people don't know is that like literally mental and physical health are connected. When you're stressed,
Yep.
yeah, your cortisol goes up, which drives
Hmm.
inflammation, which drives depression, which drives waking.
Yep.
And so, what I realized that like when I started working on my mental health, I started physically getting better, right? And my relationships improved, right? I mean, the guys that I was dating, I'm just like now look between my husband and them, I'm like, what was I thinking?
What were you thinking? Hmm.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. And it's so interesting that you said that because I don't think even not even just doctors and most therapists, but us as humans ourselves, we don't realize how everything's connected in our body.
Hmm.
When you don't get enough sleep, that's why you're miserable. You feel like things aren't worth it that you're doing. You
Hmm.
start hating your job. You start being annoyed and miserable with everybody. When you go to the gym, you don't want to work out because
You're
you're
tired.
not mentally well. You're tired. And if you're internally tired, it affects the exterior.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people be like, oh, my joints are hurting. Something must be wrong. It might be arthritis. And they start diagnosing themselves with
Right.
things, not realizing you didn't get enough sleep, honey.
Yeah.
So your joints are going to be hurting you.
You're eating a lot of like processed food, inflammation, and drives your joint hurts.
And that's exactly what being unhealed is like. You cannot just mask everything and think that it's not going to awake when something happens in your life.
Oh, amen. Yes. Yes.
We do that way too often.
We do, right? And like, I think when we're looking at mental health and trauma, and like, instead of like saying like, what did that person do? Why did they have? Why are they choosing that? Right? Why are they? I think we should ask like, what happened to them for them to choose them? Does
Right.
that make sense? Because
Right. Yeah.
with trauma, you literally don't like unresolved trauma. Your brain is kind of unable to process that you have other choices, right? Because it's still stuck
Hmm.
in the same pattern of like living in fear. And so,
So you went through losing both your parents at 9 years old
mhm.
and being raised by your sister, which you would have never known that wasn't normal. 9 years old is such a tender age for
Oh,
anybody to be like, your sister's raising you. Why? Right?
mhm.
So when did you realize that you experienced trauma? Actually, let's backtrack. What would you say your first trauma was in your life?
I think I was 6 years old and I witnessed like my stepdad being abusive to my mom, right? And I just remember like I have this clear picture of him setting fire, pouring gasoline in the house while we were all in there, and I was having to rush, trying to like. And so, yeah, I have this very distinct memory, and people don't realize with childhood trauma, like you have little pieces of your childhood, but a lot of people with
Mhm.
childhood trauma, even if they can't remember the good part, a lot of times they remember the bad parts because it just sticks out of their minds just so clearly. And so like
Yeah.
I know that was one of my first traumatic experiences. And like, my stepdad was American, was Caucasian. And I remember him being so angry with my mom because, in Ghana when we eat, you eat with your hands, right? You wash your
Hmm.
hands and like you eat. And so like a lot of the food you eat with your hands, right? And your
Yeah.
hands are still clean. But I remember him being so angry, him throwing the dish, right, at the wall and just biting her finger. So I remember he was just a very unwell man too.
Yeah.
And so I remember those were my first traumatic experience. And I do remember because my sisters, I think we came like 3 months before. And so when my three older sisters came, in a way I kind of felt like this relief because they were there, right? And like
Yeah.
my sister Gwen is like the strongest woman I know. Like she's a badass. Like she's the strongest woman I
Yeah.
know. And like I remember her just like I think she was around 18 at that, just like being able to step in between my stepdad and my mom and just fighting for her. That was like those were my first traumatic experiences, right? And I don't think I really even registered that those were not normal, right? I knew it was bad, but I didn't know people like didn't have this experience. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're so young,
Yeah.
your mind tells you that it's normal.
Yeah. And so I'm just like, and if you don't have something different, what are you going to compare it
What
to?
you compare it to, right?
And so I think looking back, how my sisters raised us, we didn't have that physical or verbal abuse, so that was safe, right? But like being not able to kind of talk about it or get counseling after, I didn't realize that like, you know, I could have been helped sooner. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I don't fault her at all, right? She's doing the best she can. She's working so many jobs, you know, and she gave me like a good life where, I played soccer, I was on the dance team, I was able to have my own car when I was around 17 to drive to school. So I like I was very lucky and I'm very grateful with how much she sacrificed. And she went on to have her own kids because I feel like if I had to raise my siblings, I wouldn't even have kids after that. Like I'll be like, we're done. I'm
Yeah.
tired. I'm done. Right? Let me
I agree.
retire. So she's
I
amazing.
agree with that. Yeah.
So she's
And
amazing. So
you know, we have learned the definition of trauma. A lot of us learned it on our own. A lot of us went on social media and found the definition of trauma. But being a therapist, how would you define trauma?
yeah. So trauma is when an event happens that you feel like you are physically unsafe, that your life is in danger, right? So like let's say so this can be either physical sexual abuse, emotional abuse that people are asking, they're threatening you, right?
Mm.
um War, um anything like natural disaster, right? But one of my favorite quotes of trauma is this: trauma is not what happened to you, but it's what happened inside of you after that event, right? Because a lot of
Mhm.
people you and I can experience the same car accident where you can end up with PTSD and I cannot, right? Because it's
Yeah.
literally, when something happens to us, do we have the resilience to like build ourselves back up? Or does it completely feel like it shatters our view of ourselves and others that we just feel emotionally
Hmm.
unsafe, even if our environment is at that time safe, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted you to give a definition of trauma because, and a wider scope of what people just think. 'Cause a lot of people believe that trauma is physical. Trauma is also mental.
And emotional.
Trauma is emotional, right? And you talk about your first experience of trauma, not knowing that it was trauma, but seeing your stepfather abuse your mom.
Mhm.
And, I like to break down the pieces, and I like to think, and I say something you just said that I've been saying for such a long time, because I have three siblings. Well, I have three stepbrothers as well. So technically, how much are there? Six, seven of us. But my sister, who lived in this same household as my brother and I, we've seen the exact same thing: the abuse on my mother, the control, the physical fights, the police at our house all the time. But the person that was affected the most that we didn't expect was the silent sibling that was standing and watching everything happen, thinking that it was normal. And now she's trying to, at 20 something years old, trying to put together the pieces and break it down in her head. Okay, what's wrong with me? Why am I always emotional? Why am I so angry? Why am I so frustrated? Why am I so aggressive against my biological parents? And why do I treat my mother so poorly? And people don't realize there is secondhand trauma, and it affects us all in different ways. Like me, I'm vocal. I healed, and now I want everybody else to heal and understand that you are greater, you're better than this. Don't let your trauma define your future. My brother's a little bit different, where he's healing and he thinks he's healed, but he still has work to do. The younger sibling, she's, what the heck happened? We didn't expect this to happen to you. You got everything. You were the one that got everything. You reaped everything. But she's struggling trying to figure out who she is because she was so silenced for so
Yeah.
long. So when you talk about that, I think also people trauma block, because that's why you didn't know that it wasn't normal.
Yeah.
So when we talk about trauma and you not knowing that it was normal, do you think that you kind of trauma blocked those events and you didn't really think it was anything, you just kind of wiped it out of your mind and moved on with your life?
So because I feel like I've always remembered it, but I think one of the best examples that I could probably trace back were like if you grow up how, not knowing anything different, right? Especially how like my a man is supposed to treat a woman, you wouldn't think anything of it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so like I guess one thing that like kind of clued me in something. So I'm very religious, right? And for the longest time, I was angry at God, and I didn't know why. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
But I also
Yeah.
had this complex relationship where like I also like felt like if I did anything wrong, he was disappointed, and my biggest goal was just to please God, right? And it gave me a lot of anxiety. I served a year and a half mission, and like that also gave me a lot of anxiety because I just felt like I was failing all the time,
Hmm.
right? And so I think when like I think that's my biggest clue that I wasn't always supposed to be anxious about God. That clued me in that like something is not right here, right? Like,
Right.
and so I don't think I think what like because I remembered it, but I don't know if like I think I just didn't really think about it. Does that make sense? I didn't think it was not normal. And so I
Hmm.
think as I reflect by the idiots that I dated, right? Like I've had someone who would yell at me, right? And I thought it was normal, right? Or like, and I would like go my way to please a guy or something, like go on my way to just give like everything because I thought they would dump me. And I'm glad like some of them
Hmm.
did because they were idiots, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like when with all that, like it's when I went to like therapy and that when I realized this is not normal, right? This is, and I had to unlearn so many patterns, like over apologizing. I still do that so much, right? Like I had to unlearn so many harmful patterns that has helped me today. Right? And when you go back, this is there was a silent one, right?
Hmm.
With your sister like affected the most, like it's not surprising because one way, like the best way, especially how to recover from trauma that happens immediately, is to talk about it. And so when you're silenced, your body is like it kind of shows that she didn't feel like have any safe place to go to talk about it. Um,
Yeah.
and so you know, I think when, you know, when in a way, like, I think even if I didn't know, like, that was um not normal, it still showed up in my action. The guys I dated, how I reacted, how I was felt so sad, right? And like,
Hmm.
have you ever read the book The Body Keeps the Score?
I've heard of it and I have not
Oh,
gotten to read it.
basically, it's right. You know, our conversation about how, our mental, emotional, and physical health is so connected. Basically, it shows that, like, people who have had trauma have experienced more physical health issues, right, than people who haven't had as much trauma or hasn't had any trauma. And so,
Hmm.
I have two pictures a year apart, and I kid you not, where I was 8 and 9. At 8 o'clock, even though at 8 years old, even though I was like, so it's like witnessing trauma, I was like 70 pounds, okay, at 8,
Hmm.
right? And I was tall, like in sixth grade, I was like 5'9" still, so I've been really grown since sixth grade. So like, and then a year later, like I'm 10 and I'm 120 pounds after I've lost my parents.
Yeah.
Right. And so I see
Hmm.
these pictures and I'm like, someone like untrained trauma like person could be like, oh, too much junk food, too much processed food, but nothing changed except for I
Hmm.
lost my parents, right? Just the
Right.
trauma changed.
They don't realize that the reason why you gained the weight was because of the trauma that happened,
Yeah.
and it's affecting your physical, mental, and emotional health. And it's funny you said something. You talked about the body keeps the scores, and although we weren't aware that it wasn't normal, our actions replicated the trauma that we
Yeah.
experienced from
Mhm.
such a tender age. And I can be the first to say this is that my actions reflected everything. Like the partner, my stepdad that my mom was with, he used to always tell my mom, "You chat too much. Shut up." And she would go silent. And then there's one point where she would talk back. And I remember when I was dating somebody and he would say, "You chat too much." And I'd feel so hurt because I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna shut up then. Don't say anything that triggers him.
Yeah.
Don't say anything that throws him off. Or when it was yelling or arguing, I would silence myself so I wouldn't cause anything to happen. Or there was another trauma where in our culture we hear that it's it's good for men to have multiple partners. It's good for them to have, multiple women in their life and stuff like that. So I would always try to be like, okay, I'm going to be understanding. If he's cheating, then it's okay because, men are supposed to have two partners. And, like everything from childhood trauma, I transferred into my life until like when I started healing, I realized, oh no, this is all from childhood trauma. This is not healthy. And I was able to stand outside and look inside of my mom's lifestyle and be like, no. I always told myself as a child, I didn't want to be any, I love her to death. She's a great woman. And I think that she did the best that she could as a mom, but I didn't want to be like her because I knew that I had more strength in me and that I could become a greater and better person. Not that she's not a good person, just the way that she handles herself and her life was not something I wanted for myself. But the body keeps the scores, so like you said, and I just naturally took everything from her and translated it into my own life, not realizing it until I realized this is not normal. Who said all of this? Who said I was supposed to live like this? Who said a man's supposed to put their hands on you? So it's literally when you heal, you're breaking apart each piece, each lie that somebody told you and you carried it for years. That's why I called the podcast Life's Deceit, because we're taught so many lies, so many myths, so many things that people told us and passed on to us that now we have to break away from it. So it's interesting that you said the body keeps the score because it literally does. And I think, as especially women, we know, but we tolerate at the same time. So for somebody who went through trauma and now they're living in that same trauma, but they're making excuses for the person that's abusive to them, excuses to the toxic friends, the career that they're in, the way that they treat themselves, the way that they carry themselves. How do they identify that childhood trauma or that transferred into their life, and now they're still living in that trauma.
I think for me, I saw some models of some very good men, right? You know, um, that were like that helped me, and I just like that helped me understand that this it's not supposed to be like this, right? Like a couple,
Mhm.
I have some very good male teachers that were like phenomenal, some very good church leaders that were guys that were phenomenal, right? And I think it helped me like be able to be, in a way, be prepared for my husband because I don't think
Mm.
I and I would have realized he was good unless I like was out of that toxic behavior. Does that make sense? When you're into something toxic,
Yeah.
you don't realize what's really good or not.
No, because it looks unfamiliar
hmm
to you.
And you kind of, the human body shies away from unfamiliar, right? Just because it's
Yeah.
unfamiliar or a shock doesn't mean it's bad. And I feel like with
Mhm.
trauma, your body, because things are unfamiliar, you feel like it's bad, right? And
Yeah.
yeah. And so I think I, I would say if they're unwilling, I would honestly always recommend a very good trauma therapist, but if they're unwilling to go there, like help them by modeling like a healthy relationship with them.
I like that advice. Sorry.
Yeah,
Because a lot of people, you can't force
you
them,
can.
right? And sometimes even as a friend or a family member, it gets frustrating because you want them to see what they're in, but they can't because it's like they have blindfolds on.
Yeah,
And it's familiar to them. It's normal to them.
yeah.
This is what they know, so they're gonna stick to it. And sometimes it just means being supportive. I mean, being there and trying to still put power words into them and supporting the best you can, because there will come a time where that person will need you,
hmm
when the light bulb
Yeah.
finally goes off and they're like, okay, yeah, this is not normal,
Yeah.
this is not healthy, and I need to get out.
And people, they're not going to come to you if you're constantly criticizing them or making them feel ashamed, right? They're going to feel ashamed to
Right.
come.
Mhm.
Look at maybe like if they're unwilling to leave their partner, like after if you have a fight with them, you're like, be like apologize to them, help them validate their feelings and say, I love you. I'm not, I love you because you're you, not because what you did. Kind of model that to them. So when it clicks, I'm like, oh, my sister loves me because they're me, and you're treating me like, no, this doesn't work that way.
Right. And then not being judgmental,
Yeah.
because you know I don't think people, and I see it a lot now. You see these quotes go around about what a friendship should look like or a supportive person in your life, but I always say to people, just show up. Don't judge. Even if somebody's saying, well, I got into a fight with my partner, I'm gonna leave, still stay neutral, because people say things when they're mad, and tomorrow things may be good
Yeah.
with them and that partner, and you don't want, right? And you don't want them to push away from you, because that's what happens when they know
Yeah.
that you are not supportive that person and they're unhealed. You're pushing them away,
Mhm.
and they're not going to want to share information with you anymore.
Yep.
If you have nothing nice to say, I always say, just listen and say, you know what, I don't understand what you're going through, but I'm here for you, and I'm going to support you in whatever way you need me to,
And whatever you need me to do, right? I will be there next
and
to you.
whatever you need.
Yeah. I think that's honestly the
I
most
agree.
healthy, right? Like you can encourage
Yeah.
people, but sometimes when people are ready to leave, then they'll leave. But if you model it and say, I noticed that you know, they're not talking to you in the nicest way. Are you okay, right? Maybe not just because if they're becoming defensive of the party, but maybe he's not saying he's the asshole, but saying, I know that may have hurt your feelings. Are you okay? Do you want to talk about that, right?
Yep. 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 And that's how you keep people close to
Yeah.
you, and you're able to still support
Mhm.
them. It's just, although it makes you upset, just try to suck it up and just be as supportive as you
Mhm.
can.
Yeah.
Now, losing a mom, moms are a girl's first best
Yeah.
friend, beside, if you have a sister. Losing a mom so young at 9 years old, those are some pretty fragile times in your life. My daughter's 10, so I can't imagine not being in her life at that age. Um, what was that like for you? I know you had a supportive sister. that was always there, and you probably didn't even really notice that. Like, you knew your mom was gone, but the love that your sister gave didn't make you feel like, oh my gosh, mom. You like, because you talk about how she was so supportive and there for you. What was that like though, not having your mom there, especially during important times and milestones in your life?
And I like how you said milestone because I think there's like I think grief. And I also specialize in grief therapy, so I don't think grief we ever like time heals all wounds. I think your heart just expands so you're able to carry it, right? And I
Mhm.
think you just move
Yeah.
forward with it. But with my mom, you know, I think there are certain periods of my life that I feel like I'm more sad, right? So like when I was getting
Hmm.
married, right? I just remember just falling one day in the car and saying like, I don't have her, and that's not fair. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Or just
Hmm.
like, or when I'm going through a hard time, or when I remember um, her death day, or her birthday. And so for the longest time, her birthday is January 7th, and so for the longest time, it just when that day came, it was just like heartbreaking. I couldn't really celebrate it. And I don't know, I
Hmm.
think God is so good because He knew this, and my husband was born on the exact same day.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so like that day now brings me joy because I love celebrating my husband. He's, I think he's the most compassionate person I've ever met and the most kindest soul ever. And so it brings me joy to celebrate him. Does that make sense? And so
Hmm.
that day doesn't
Yeah.
seem so burdened, if that makes sense. So I feel like that's, and he wasn't supposed to be born on January 7th. He was supposed to be born a week later. And so
Wow.
I just feel like for me, I'm like, that's like a tender mercy from God because I feel like he knew, does
Hmm.
that make sense? He knew that.
Yeah, he knew that you needed
Yeah.
that. Yeah, he knew that you needed that, and it's interesting sometimes. Like, we think about the things that God does, and we're like, wait, this goes here. You filled in the gaps. You gave me something I didn't even know that I needed. You filled like a void in me without even me asking. You just knew automatically that I would need this person in my
Yeah.
life. That's pretty exciting to be able to share that with him as well, your mom's birthday, and celebrate with him without feeling sad, like,
Yeah.
but celebrating her life that you were able to live with her.
And so I feel that that's pretty special. And I think going back about what it's like growing without your mom, I think in a way, because like, because I do get sad by the milestones, and I'm sure when we decide to have a kid and I we have our first kid, I might feel that more keenly, right? But I feel
Yeah.
like growing up, I feel like I miss them because my sister is so wonderful, right? And like I have that just supportive. And other than my husband, when I'm mad at something or when like, I just call her. And like, guess what they did?
Yeah.
And so
I'm glad you had her. Yeah.
with that, I feel more keenly of what it's like not to have a father. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Because I
Yeah.
feel like I had such a crap, like, and I honestly, I just feel like where those kind of daddy issues come from, right? Where, like,
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
like it wasn't ever modeled to me what a father should be like, right? And like I've had this
Hmm.
like complex of trying to, and I feel like he's men, like before in a way of like I felt like I was always more submissive to him, but I was also more angry and would talk back and tell them like they can go shove it somewhere because I wasn't taking that crap. It was
Hmm.
just such a unique
Yeah.
relationship where like I wanted to be loved by them, but I also was so angry at them that I didn't take any crap.
And that's what happens from,
Hmm.
trauma. I took a lot, but I wasn't going to take any crap
Yeah.
from them. So I understand
And
that.
so as you're like healing and that like as you're like you kind of miss you're like what would have been like to have a daddy, right? And like so I might
Hmm.
write an acting dance with my sister because they're like do you want to I get like people gave me options like they're like you can dance with your father-in-law, you can dance with some of these women. Like, no, I'm gonna dance with my sister because she was my mother and my father, and she like raised me. Does that make sense? Like, so like I dance
Yeah,
like hero with her because she's like my hero, right? And so
it's
yeah, so
beautiful.
I danced with her. She decided to stop the dance and do some ridiculous interpretive dance, but whatever.
Yeah.
But
You know, you had a supportive sister
mm,
that stood by you. And when you realize that, hey, I went through all this trauma that I never healed from, I wasn't even aware of, was she supportive? Did she walk with you on that
I
journey?
think I walked that journey myself.
We're doing something special. I'm doing something so special that I've been wanting to do because I've had hiccups in doing it. And it's a giveaway. We're giving away a $200 Amazon gift card to one listener who's been walking this journey with us. Why am I doing it now? Because truth tellers deserve to be celebrated. Because healing is hard, but we're doing it together. And I know I was supposed to do a giveaway before and things got a little bit out of control, but we're doing it now. And to enter, please follow my Instagram page at Life's Deceit Pod. Like and share the post on Instagram. Tag 2 friends in the comments that you know that the podcast resonates with. And for a bonus, drop a comment underneath the post about how you turned your pain into purpose.